Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we're talking about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Preacher, a crazy, wild ride of an episode. This was a great episode. First of all, let's talk about that elevator scene. That was sick. It's always badass when you get to see, like, Jesse kind of go out, like, I feel like a lot of times you don't get to see him, like, how good of a fighter he is. Like, that whole elevator scene was sick, taking everybody down. And I love that guy being like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to catch the next elevator. You have, like, Jesse nod his head, like, yeah, that's a good idea. I was like, I wasn't expecting that when it was like, I mean, Hare did say, like, hey, kill him when you get the chance, and, like, Jesse wasn't going to miss that chance. I thought it was like, when we get back, I mean, we hear the noises and stuff like that, but I was like, maybe Jesse gets out at the last second, but it's like, no, he comes back out, he's ready to kill the Allfather, shoots him, but it's like, oh, it's just a flesh wound, because he is so massive, which is crazy. He just kind of shrugs it off being shot, too. I guess Jesse should have, it's one of those instances, he should have went with a headshot. But that's kind of wild and crazy. That storyline, obviously, I'm going to focus on it. Some interesting developments. It's all about, like, Jesse believing, like, no, he was chosen for whatever reason to have Genesis. Like, you know, it's obviously the whole thing of, like, oh, Genesis tried to be taken out of him before. And that's something I kind of brought up last episode. I thought was kind of interesting. Like, if his grandmother tried, like, I brought up the whole thing of, like, well, if his grandmother tried, like, because she knew what Genesis was, I was like, so if she tried to take it out, like, she wouldn't be successful. It'd just go right back to him. So the episode kind of deals with that a little bit, because it turns out, for one, they have a machine, because I feel like there's no normal means of doing that. Like, even what Fior and DeBlanc did was kind of like it had to be like some ancient angel enchantment. It was like a specific song. We never actually found out why that song specifically got to it, like what that was all about. I guess it's kind of like a lullaby type of song, but it's like why Genesis cared for that song, I don't know. But it turns out that they're trying to put Genesis in Humperdinck, which apparently, I guess that's something only Hare calls him, because it's like, no, that's the royal Christ child. It's like, right, okay. So that's something only everyone else but the Allfather, like, unless you're in the Allfather's presence, you don't refer to him as Humperdinck. That's just kind of everyone's, I guess, alternate name for him, in a sense. I mean, because even Humperdinck responds to it. He even said, like, oh, I'm Humperdinck. He said that last season, so even he responds to it, but nevertheless. And it's like, oh, he's going to try. I was like, oh, it makes sense. He is, like, Christ, one of Christ's descendants. I'm like, okay, so it's going to work. And it doesn't, he explodes. I'm like, okay, that's crazy. But then they bring in another one. It's like, okay, they cloned him. Which, in retrospect, is like, of course you would clone him. Because it makes the most sense. You've gone through so much to ensure that this bloodlines existed throughout all of time and made sure that it stayed as pure as possible. So of course you'd clone him. I mean, it's still kind of crazy coming out of left field with it. It's like, whoa, they cloned him. But at the same time, I was like, but it makes sense. You would clone the most important person in the world. So that's just such a fascinating thing. He does say later on, it's like them bringing the Messiah. So there is the original. The original is kept secure, but they do probably have like a lot of like them on staff. I guess maybe there's been stuff in the past where there's been close calls and they're like, I don't know. It just seems like in Humperdinck's case, like there'd be accidents where he like kills himself or something like that. I mean, who knows if there hasn't been clones that have accidentally done that. But what I thought was so fascinating is we finally got an explanation of why Genesis chose Jesse, why it latches onto him, why it exploded out some other people, because of it's what it is, half angel, half demon. It's a mixture of good and evil, a specific mixture. It's not like a balance of like a 50-50. I mean, maybe I guess you can make the argument it is that, but the fact is they never said that specifically. It means like the ratio could be off. It could be like 40-60, you know, whatever the case may be. And Jesse fits that criteria so much. I'm like, that makes so much sense. It's like, that's really good, because Genesis would bond with a human that reflects it. Jesse is a very complex character because he does have good tendencies, but he's also got a very bad side to him as well. Like the show centers around that. He's always tried his best to be a good guy, which does show that, hey, there is a good guy in there, but just as much there's a bad guy in there. And so, like I said, it's not so evenly split. I do think it kind of, at least at the very least, I'm thinking it's implying that the evil kind of balances out, like in the sense of like, it's a little bit more than the good, but maybe it's the other way around. Maybe the good is more than evil, but nevertheless. And it also plays into why Genesis doesn't work when Jesse's missing even 1% of his soul. And it kind of goes with what I thought before. Like, if you've never heard, my thought process has always been, it's because Genesis exists in his soul, and if Genesis isn't complete, it can't operate is what my thought process is. But it's like, which is not too far off, but it's because of that perfect balance of like the soul. It needs a specific soul that reflects its nature. But if Jesse's missing 1% of his soul, it throws off the balance in his soul. So it's like, even if it was like, oh, it needs to be 40% good and 60% evil or vice versa, that changes the percentage. Even just that 1% is enough to disrupt the balance that is Genesis. I guess it's enough to make it so that Genesis stays, but Genesis isn't on the same frequency as Jesse anymore. And that is such a mind-blowing and amazing detail. I was like, that's such a good explanation. I'm totally fine with that. Like I said, my thought process wasn't too far off, but the specific details like that is so freaking amazing. Like, I cannot give that enough credit storyline wise. I would have never thought of a balance like that. Like, I kind of got it, but not to the extent of like what represents the soul, the good and the bad, the yin and the yang. It needs to be 100% in balance, and it needs to be 100% balance reflecting Genesis' own situation. I thought that was fascinating. But also the fact is they're trying out different concoctions of putting different people's blood samples together to make it so that what flows through their system reflects the same thing. So the final one ended up being Thomas Jefferson and Wayne Brady. Which one was which? Maybe they specifically kind of showed it, but I kind of missed the detail. I thought that was kind of an interesting combination. Oh, so interesting. And it turns out it works in the end. So at the same time, it does kind of show that, I guess you could make the argument technically Jesse was chosen. I mean, don't be fair, it went to a lot of specific people too. Let's not forget some of the people it went to. But I wonder why a preacher in particular though. I guess preachers in general kind of represent that balance. Because it's like it kept going to preachers. Why? I guess they're the closest thing, like they're holy men. So I guess it kind of brings them the aspect of like, they represent that side of like, oh, like they talk, they pray to God and they try to prevent people from going to hell. So I guess they act as like a medium for like heaven and hell in a sense. I guess like that's still never explained why preachers, because that's all they ever went after, or at least top ranking people in religious position. Because it is kind of interesting that the All-Father doesn't use himself as an example. That's what I think is fascinating. Because in fact, he even says himself is like, oh, I'm more deserving of it than you, but still. Still kind of go, because the thing I was kind of alluding to when I was explaining is like, it seems like it is just happenstance that it ends up being Jesse. It just seems like Jesse was like the next one down the list. You just happen to fit the requirements. Maybe there isn't some grand plan and design. It seems like God's got his own thing going on. Once again, we don't know what that is, but it seems like everything going down is some part of his plan, I assume. But the fact of the matter is, like, what that is, we still don't know, but I don't know, maybe there is more to Jesse being picked, or whether it was complete another accident. I know I'm skipping around. Let's not forget, even Satan himself has been like, oh, I've had an eye on Jesse Custer for a while. I was like, why? It's not, you didn't even know he had Genesis until Miss Marie said anything. Like, obviously, I'll dive into that, but it's like, why were you paying attention to Jesse? I guess it's because that's Marie's grandson. Once again, like I brought it up, it's like, we don't actually know how old she is. Eating souls and stuff, she stays young forever. So it's like, we don't know how old she is. Like Jesse's, and I brought this up previously, like Jesse's mom might have been her first child, and Jesse might be her only grandchild ever, like no telling how old she is. She might just be kind of relatively her own age, whatever the case may be. So they might not be, and they may be, because like the way she holds onto them so tightly makes it seem like they're the only one she's ever had, or at the very least, they're the only one she has left. So that's also something to think about. So, but the fact is, at the end, like, and it turns out Genesis did go to him, because that Thomas Jefferson Wayne Brady combination was the perfect fit. And I love like Jesse constantly going to Harry and it's like, help me out here. And Harry's like, oh, I'm gonna do something, but then he doesn't, because he is, once again, like we set him up last season, like, oh man, Harry, he's crazy, ain't nothing going to scare him or stop him. And it's like, no, he is quivering in his shoes at the All-Father. It's crazy. It may seem like the All-Father's just some dude, but I guess no matter what the situation is, he's still the most powerful person that I guess even in death, people would still follow him. And also, as we can see where the connections are, heaven and hell, like he'd still be kicking. Even if you killed him, there's no permanent way to get rid of him, because even in hell or heaven, whichever way he went, he'd still have a little leeway and pull, because we know the Grail definitely has those type of connections. So that's what I'm assuming. you know? So even he wouldn't lose his position no matter which side of the coin he ended up on, you know? So I guess that's why Harry's so terrified, because it's like, if I kill him, people will still be loyal to him afterwards, and he'll probably find some way back to get back on Earth. And that's kind of my chalking it up to it, but it's just like crazy to think Harry's scared of him. So, but the fact is, at the end when he says like, oh, his magic, I was like, oh, it's all over. I was like, oh, is it going to explode at last second? And I was like, is it? It's like, oh, I guess it's not, because he activates the word of God, Humperdew does, and then it goes back inside of Jesse. I'm like, what the hell? And then what's the doctor's name? She kills him. I'm like, oh, is she actually secretly working with Harry Starr? And it's like, no, that was part of the plan. It's like, now bring in the real Messiah. So like I said, I guess not less all the people we've met were genetic clones. That might be why the Humperdews have been acting the way they have. Maybe the real Messiah is like that, or I would assume so, since Hare's so intent on, but that's why they threw out so many, because it's like, oh, we're trial and error, so we're using a whole bunch of clones. So I guess the one Jesse met last season is the real, or no, because the one that popped up this episode has to be like, this season had to have been the real one too, like when the Owl Father was so impressed with his tap dancing and stuff, that had to be the real one. So that's what I'm chalking it up to. So I'm very interested to see where this all goes. Like, man, Jesse is steps away from losing him. I wonder though, I guess it doesn't matter, because it's like, because I was like, Jesse's missing piece of soul, does that mean? It's like, no, Jesse's missing piece of soul only affects him, not Genesis. I guess it is more so of a situation of Genesis, like if we had to compare it to anything else, I guess it's like a symbiote. It's kind of its own thing. Even if a piece of you goes away, it's still going to manage on its own. Because I always thought, it's like, no, it's infused with his soul, but it's like, no, it's in his body. It's in his body. That's all it is. It's kind of like a entity all on its own inside of his body. Like him losing a piece of his soul throws off Genesis like frequency with them, so now they're kind of on different frequencies, but Genesis is still fully intact, because I would think that would have an effect, but it's like, no, the moment when Humperdew fully activated, so it won't help Jesse until he fully gets his soul back, but anyone else can take it and use it for their own, because their souls are in the perfect balance and complete, so they won't have the same issue. So it's like, that kind of answers what I was thinking. But going to it, I love that whole nightmare sequence that Miss Marie had. I thought that was fascinating. Cause I was like, oh, Featherstone's dead. Cause at first I was like, what? We don't get to see how the Osaka job goes out. I was like, oh man, that sucks. But it's like, we do. And it's like her nightmare. It's interesting that in her nightmare, the person that's dead is Featherstone. I was like, why did you imagine that? I mean, that might be a little foreshadowing, so there might be some layers to it. But she goes outside, there's Sabina and all the other people's souls she's eaten and just, messed up over with her entire life. And it turns out, it's like, oh, she meets with Satan. So it's like, of course, she has to have, she has a connection. It's like, once again, I brought it up before, like maybe that's why she knows about Genesis, because she is so old, because she's in a soul game, because she's part of this supernatural world. Probably everyone in that connected to that world will have heard whispers of Genesis. It is a special and old thing, literally the only thing of its kind, half angel, half demon. Like, you probably hear stories about something like that. But it turns out that this whole situation is Satan Miss Marie made a deal with Satan. That's why she can do that whole eating souls thing. It's like, oh, you can eat as many souls as you want to and stay young, but the moment you die, your soul is mine. So it's like, that's why she's so intent on staying alive. Probably just naturally because she doesn't want to die, but more so than anything because she knows she's going straight to hell, so she's trying to prevent that for as long as possible. Hence why I'm talking about, you don't know how old she actually is. That's going to be incredible, but she's literally on the ends of death's door, so she needs those souls now, which is interesting because she puts a hit out on Tulip because she naturally hates Tulip. Tulip wants her dead anyway, so she knows that if things go down the way, I guess the whole point is because for one, she needs to remove Tulip from the equation, so kill Tulip. But what about Jesse? If Satan does what he needs to, he'll probably rip Genesis out of Jesse. Also, this acts as a good bargaining chip so that, Miss Marie can get what she wants, but also it makes it so that Jesse can't get out of his contract, so he's forced to stay here. And she also removes Tulip from the equation by making it like one last person she has to worry about, essentially. So, which is an incredible situation. Then Satan sending Sydney, the angel of death, to go track down Tulip and bring her back. Not kill her, bring her back. I guess he's going to do it himself. I'm assuming that's what that is. But I love the Osaka job. That was so good. Their and was running a sexual harassment seminar. But I love how they play with that in this episode, and just kind of the awkward like play acting that Tulip and Jody do. I was like, are they doing this because I was like, oh, they're working. I was like, oh, are they actually here working, trying to pretend to be people? It's like, oh, we're new employees working here and stuff like that. It's like, I didn't understand what the scenario was. I'm like, oh, they're trying to play it up in front of people. It's like, I don't get it. And it's like, freeze. It's like, oh, it's part of a seminar. That's incredible. And then Tulip flips it. Like Featherstone sets it up. It's like, no. Tulip, you have to, be the one that kind of harasses this director. It was all for the purpose of getting his card. We could have done it a different way, but Featherstone's like, oh yeah, I just wanted to make you touch his butt. It's like, I love that they hate each other so much, the back and forth. It's like, what are you doing? It's like, I'm chewing gum because my character chews gum. Your character's the one with the ugly broken nose. And it's just like so much shit talking. I love it. Then they're both trying to break into the safe. No luck. Jody, meanwhile, bashes those dudes in with a hammer because it's bloody. And he brings a crossword puzzle. So, but I love that whole situation when they finally get on the plane. Also love that Sydney, that dude, like I guess that was kind of showing you, it's like, oh, that poor bastard, he picked the, I mean, for one, you never touch anyone without their permission, but he definitely picked the wrong person to touch. He's like, oh, I can't help myself. And we see her, I also like the way she summons her blade. It just seemed like she just like pulled it from her hand and kind of like summoned it like that, cut away from her slicing his throat. But that's incredible. And then she also the Tulip O'Hare. Nope. I was like, is that really going to work? And Sydney's looking at her and it's like, okay. And I'm like, that really worked? You lying and saying you not that person and you putting up a fake ID, that was enough? And it's like, well, to be fair, Satan probably never gave a really good description. It's just kind of like, he gave a vague description. Brown hair, works with a grill, wearing a grill suit. And it's like, oh, but Tulip's like, oh, you know who he is? And it's like, to be fair, and points out Featherstone. It's like, to be fair, if Featherstone wasn't such a dick, Tulip wouldn't have sold her out like that. It would have been like, oh, I'm sorry, it must be someone else. But it's like, because you had to make that remark of, oh, you did actually, I know we can't stand each other, but you did a good job. Oh, thanks. I was kidding. It's like, if you weren't such an asshole, you wouldn't have to worry about that situation. So, and Tulip kind of did the O'Hare thing. And it's just like, things cannot work out for Tulip. I mean, that O'Hare curse, I feel like this is the first time they've really pushed it, because this is the season of, man, stuff is not working out for Tulip. Like, it's just almost like a string of bad luck. She just happens to grab the wrong case, and Featherstone is the one with the souls. And now it's like, oh, now we got to stop them because they're on their way to hell. Which later on we see Sydney dropping them off, showing up the bus stop where Eugene, the cowboy, and Hitler are. Hitler, apparently, home dude last episode, I was talking about the fact is, oh man, that dude's just nodding along and everything. It's like, oh, is he, like, what's up with that? It's like, no, he turns out to be a Nazi because we see that he's got the tattoo. Hitler must have contacted him and it's like, yo, he's going to get his Nazi buddies. And it's like, oh God, that's happening. And then there's a whole situation of obviously Jody and Tulip are going to go do that. I mean, obviously, it's going to be awkward because Tulip's going to be like, so how the hell did you know? You knew what was going to go down and you just let that happen. So it's kind of, Tulip still has to go through with it anyway if she means to like get Jesse out of this situation. So getting those souls is the best bet. But now she also knows that Grandma tried to basically send hell after her. So it's like, that's another angle all on its own. That's insane. So a lot is going to be converging on that bus stop. It's so interesting too, because Eugene keeps talking about the fact of the matter is like, oh, because for whatever reason in my head, because they cut to that scene after he said, bring me the Messiah, I was like, they're not going to do that to Eugene, are they? He's like, nah, there's not enough evil in Eugene to balance that out. Like even if there is evil in him, which I hardly doubt it, but it's like, even then it's like, there's too much good in him for that to be the case. But he's like, God, like, had to have put me here for a reason. Sadly, Eugene doesn't know about the whole situation of God being missing. But once again, we see what he's doing with Tulip. Who's to say each and everything isn't some roundabout way? Because like I said, Jesse kind of being an asshole, he is kind of let that slip that like, oh yeah, I should be kind of getting him out of hell, shouldn't I? Like, you haven't really found a way. I mean, he's so focused on God, even stating in this episode to Allfather, it's like, I'll be the one to make God answer for like disappearing and doing what he's doing. So it's like, you don't know. I mean, what like strings he's pulling all across the board in this situation. So I'm curious to see if Eugene does have a purpose and what that ends up turning out to be, so. But also on the other side of things is the whole Aquarius situation, him and Cassidy. Then there's the Hoover thing, like poor Hoover, he was stock locked and loaded. I was surprised that he was willing to handle this himself. It's like, well, the help he got last time got massacred. So I was like, yeah, of course he's going to try and handle this himself. That powerful, like, UV light gun, well, I don't know if that counts as a UV light. It looks like just a regular light. Powerful light gun, steaks, and some garlic. I wonder, does the garlic thing actually work, or is that just BS? I'd assume it must not be BS if he's wearing it. I mean, the Grail must have some connection, so not like pulling. I don't remember none of them wearing garlic last episode, so he must have been pulling from movies or whatever, but nevertheless. I'll pour him like Cassidy's texting with Harris, like, okay, we got your due, sending him pictures, and he's like, oh, I'm frightened. And it's like, okay, so leave us alone or he dies. I'll go ahead and kill him. And like you have Cassidy texting like, seriously? He's like, yep, he's an idiot. I'll catch up to you sooner or later. And it's like poor poor Hoover. Then Icarus is like, oh, let's save him. Which I'm so curious why. Well, now in retrospect, it kind of makes sense because Cassie had talked about it himself. He's like, oh, I've turned all these people. And at first I was like, oh, is that supposed to be what makes you stronger? It's all the different people you turn? I was like, that's fascinating. And now in retrospect, well, for one, Hoover being reluctant, he's like, wait, I have to give up. I can never be in the sun, no beaches or anything. It's like, no, it kind of comes with the territory and stuff like that. But then he's like, yeah, I'd rather pick that than death. I also love the whole Kevin situation. I love that where it's like, oh yeah, well, it's like, okay, guys, so how should we kill the guy? And then like, Kevin's like, okay, how about bees like in Wicker Man? He's like, no, would you have a bunch of bees and you a beekeeper? He's like, yes. No, seriously. He's like, no, I'm rolling. He's like, oh really? He's like, I'm so sorry for doubting you. It's like, oh yeah, everyone down for the bee idea, and everyone's like, yeah. I thought that was kind of neat, but Hoover gets turned, and I'm like, okay, are you going to use him for intel or something? It's like, why you pick him? I guess it's because in retrospect, it kind of makes sense. I don't think he likes doing what he does. I mean, maybe there's some sadistic side of him that does, but I guess for him, it's like, oh, Hoover's an asshole anyway. He's kind of a terrible person. Him and his people hate our kind anyway. So it's like, I'll take advantage of the situation. Because it turns out that's how he's been getting as powerful as he is. Because he devours other vampires, he gains their strength, and that's why he can use all those abilities. Because I was like, yeah, because Cassidy has shown no signs of any of these abilities. That's why, because he hasn't gone on cannibalistic. That's so interesting. So that's his another motivation behind like being the way he is, because it makes him stronger, being able to do the things he does. But Cassidy finds him out, and because he had just asked about Lisa too earlier in the episode, I was like, oh, that's so neat. So he ends up knocking Cassidy out. He's just like, oh, you're a bloody murderer, and just kind of was about to deal with him, but got knocked out. I'm assuming, and I could be 100% wrong about this, he might try and blame it on Cassidy, be like, oh, I'm sorry to tell you, my brothers and sisters, but Cassidy's not who we thought he was. Look at this. He did this to Lisa. Maybe. I mean, Hoover ended up getting away. I hope he remembers for protection. I mean, all he has is that little umbrella that Cassidy gave him. Maybe that'll bide him over to time, kind of fixes stuff. That's so interesting too. Like everything happening with the Grail, I was like, I can't wait for Featherstone and Hoover to meet again. And it's like, oh yeah, he's a vampire. It makes you wonder, would she treat him any differently? But I mean, hell, she's in her own situation. So interesting choice of words there, I should say, me using the word hell. But yes. Crazy turn of events. This was a great episode. I am so excited to see where the next episode takes us. I think I was reading, it was like I said, I try to avoid looking at the previews, but I think it said 2 episodes left this season, I assume, which I'm guessing this is like episode 8. So I was assuming it was going to be like 13 episodes like last season, but apparently it seems like it's only going to be 10. But I'm so excited to see how this all plays out in the next episode, especially as we're inching closer towards the end of the season. That things are getting crazier and crazier. But really, that's all I want to talk about in this episode. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good